Again, Jeff, alcoholic.
Hey, Jeff.
And yeah, I remember the first time I had to speak, I was telling my sponsors, I'm really nervous about this. Like, what if I get up there and say something stupid? And he says, why are you worrying about that now? You know, I have a long history. He says, worst case scenario, if you really screw it up, they'll quit asking you. So they haven't quit asking me, so I guess I'm still supposed to carry a message. But yeah, Tim did a great job, and I wish I could live up to his expectations. He talked about me carrying this message, being faithful, and my walk hasn't been perfect for sure. I'm no saint, but I was separated from alcohol the last time, January 11th, 1987, and for that I'm really grateful because that wasn't my intention that night. Oh, excuse me, just reminded me of that moment. I was born and raised in Vancouver, Washington. My mother was 17 years old when she had me, and my father was 18. They were high school sweethearts. She was a junior in high school, and he was a senior. And right after they got married, my father took off for Vietnam. By the end of the 1st of July, he was gone. And I really didn't see him until I was about 5 years old. And so, the first 5 years of my life were pretty good. He came back from Vietnam, and I remember the night before kindergarten, he'd come in, and here's my war hero father came home and said, tomorrow you're a man, and, you should learn to drink like one. So my mom was in bed. He sat me down at the kitchen table and poured me a big glass of Andre Cold Duck and lit me a cool cigarette, and I sat there and drank the big Tupperware tumbler of Andre Cold Duck. And that was my first drink. And I'll probably always remember it, not because I remember the drunk, not because it really made me feel any different. I don't remember really, but what I know is that it sort of told me that, that's the way you connect with people. Drinking was the way that I could get out of myself and feel okay with you people. And kind of like Tim said, a lot of us feel that, we just don't quite fit in our skin from the beginning, and that's me. I mean, I was always the shy kid hiding behind my mom's skirt. When there was book reports at school, I would skip that day, and usually I'd skip the whole week just in case they were making them up. I mean, the last thing I want to do is get up here and, expose myself and then, potentially look like an idiot. But, problem is I learned to drink by the time I was 6 or 7. My parents had asked me to take the garbage out. My dad blew out about then, off to get married and divorced 5 more times, total 6 marriages and divorces before he died at 52 of cirrhosis. But my mom got remarried, and he was also a drinker. And they'd ask me 6 or 7 years old, take the garbage out. I'd swing by the refrigerator on the way out, grab a beer, go out, take the garbage out, get in the garbage can, slam that beer real quick, and go back in. And that allowed me to be in the house and be comfortable. My stepdad is, very angry alcoholic. I mean, he's the sweetest guy in the world when he has a few drinks, and when he's not drinking, which was most of the time because he couldn't control. He's Native American, and the thing is he couldn't control his liquor. So when he began to drink, it would get excessive, and he would get violent, and it'd be jails and police officers and crash cars and stuff. So almost always, most of my childhood, he was angry and sober. And so that was, I had one alcoholic that was the town drunk that blew out, and the other one was the angry alcoholic that stayed home and never drank. And so I saw both of those. My dad's side of the family, they were all the town drunks, and then my mom's side of the family, they were maintenance drinkers. I was really hoping I would maybe be one of those maintenance drinkers. So I drank as often as I could. I think my social drinking ended when I was 12. Right after my 6th grade graduation, I was going to meet some of my buddies out in the woods, and I just discovered marijuana. That was the big thing back then. Good green stuff that stunk. And 10-finger lids or $10 lids or whatever. But it's like we were going to meet in the woods and smoke some of that stuff, and they wanted some booze to go with it. So I stole a 5th of vodka from Grandma. And I met him out in the woods, and I'd stop by the store and grab a quart of orange juice to go with it because I just thought people drink orange juice with their vodka. It's just it's like what Grandma did. So we showed up out there, and it's like I remember they started smoking their pot, and we passed the 5th around, and they took a couple pulls off it, and they seemed to be content with a drink or two, and they were done. I had a couple drinks, and that was like the first time I was ever given enough to really get going. I mean, I drank as often as I could before that, but that was the point where I had enough booze to get over that hump. And I really got that buzz going, and I kept thinking, this is good. And it's like, for whatever reason, I couldn't stop. So I ended up drinking that whole 5th myself. And you're like 70 pounds, and you put a whole 5th down. I spent 3 days unconscious, alcohol poisoning, and that was the first time I quit. I quit drinking, 20 years before I was legal to drink, But so yeah, I swore at 12, I'm never doing that again. It probably lasted about 2 weeks. Like every time I swore I'd never drink again, And but the marijuana thing became more prevalent, and I had a gal friend her parents owned a pharmacy, and she had keys to the store because she'd go in there and clean up on weekends and stuff and help them out. And we discovered that if we unlocked the door, went in there and loaded our backpacks full of various non-AA approved goods, we could sneak out the door and then smash out the front window and make it like a smash and grab. And so, I began to use drugs to treat my alcoholism, even when I was a kid. And I did that as long as I could. I was about 16. The stepfather that I absolutely hated, it's like he was getting more and more abusive. And part of it was my behavior. If I was the parent of an out-of-control teenager that's sneaking out of the house and being arrested on a regular basis and stealing stuff and breaking into the neighbors' places, doing the stuff, I would probably be pretty heavy-handed too. But I thought it was unjust and unfair. It's like, I'm 16, I should be able to run my life, right? But he didn't see it that way. So we got into it. I ran away from home, moved to Seattle. By then, my father just finished his fourth marriage, I think, and was living in a beautiful trailer park over here on Pacific Highway in the south end of Seattle. And so I moved in with him. At the time, he was a salesman for Pabst Blue Ribbon. And the beautiful thing about that, I'm 16 years old, and I have a semi truck back up to our trailer like the first of every month, and they would unload pallets of beer. And, they had all these different varieties. And he says, just make sure you save 1 6-pack of each type for samples and you can drink the rest, because he was a hard booze drinker. So, at 16, I had all the beer I wanted to drink, and so I'm drinking, I'm using drugs, and I'm doing all this stuff. And, life was getting pretty bad. It was spiraling out of control. So at 17, I'm barely getting through school. And he suggested, being a Vietnam vet, that maybe I should join the military. Maybe that's what I needed. Just, military would straighten me out. So at 17, I went down and raised my hand, joined the military, and off the basic training I went. Problem was, I was pretty good for the first 6 weeks, and then at the 6 weeks point, we'd accomplished most of our goals, and they gave us the pass to go in and get a beer. They said, everybody can have 1 beer. I'm a smart guy, So 1 beer, it's like, that's a schooner or a pitcher, same thing, right? So of course, I drank a pitcher of beer, which was enough to, kick off that phenomenon of craving, And so we got back and into the barracks, and they turned the lights off and put us to bed. And I wasn't satisfied with that. So, me and another guy, we snuck out. We decided to go back to the PX for some more. And, there was somebody waiting for us when we got back. And so I was almost removed from the military, my first couple of months there, because I had, been AWOL and snuck out. But, my father knew my first sergeant, he knew the company commander, and he was in Vietnam with my drill sergeant. So, they smoothed it over and said, oh, we're just going to punish him a little bit. And, so I got through that okay. Came back to Seattle, and when I got back, my father knew Senator Jackson, and one of the things, they put a carrot in front of me. They thought, if you can just keep a B average, in your senior year in high school, we can get you a spot at West Point. And I didn't have a lot going on for me, and a free education sounded like a pretty good idea. I'd have to do a couple of years in the military, but I didn't really care. That was no big deal. At 17, they let me drink anyway. If you're old enough to, die for your country, you're old enough to drink. But so I thought, that'd be a great deal. And, but of course my drinking interfered. I couldn't keep a B average, I was a pretty smart kid, but I just couldn't show up for school. I was just missing the tests. I was missing, missing a lot of life. But my drinking was, taking more serious proportions. So I didn't get through that. I went off again to another year or so of military training. By the time I came back, my dad had started a new business, and he was running a company called Seattle Beer and Wine. We had a warehouse down in Kent, like 20,000 square feet of all the beer and wine you'd possibly ever want. And, as an alcoholic with keys to the warehouse, I drank a lot. And I got away with that as long as I could until, we drank more than we were selling at some point. And, bankruptcy court was knocking on the door. They said, you haven't paid these bills and you have some issues. And so we sold as much as we could out the back door off the books and piled up a bunch of cash and thought we were going to go to Mexico for a vacation. So run to Mexico and got down there, and he paid for the hotel for the whole month we were going to be there. And we already had our plane tickets home, so that was secure. Alcoholic, you never know what's going to happen. You need to make sure that's in place, And then he said, "Here's your share of the money," and he gives me a pocket full of money. And so I decided, that night or some night very shortly after that, I was going to show some Mexicans how to drink mezcal. Didn't work out too well. I woke up face down in the sand the next morning. My wallet's gone, my money's gone, and it's like it was a pretty bad experience. And so I went back to my dad and said, "Oh, look at this horrible thing that happened to me." He says, "Too bad, kid. I already gave you your money, And he said, I'll make sure you eat. I'll buy you a meal every day, and the room's paid. But it's like you're gonna have to figure out what you're gonna do." He said, "Why don't you get a hold of somebody in Seattle and see if they can Western use some money?" And as this business was going broke, I had just got a job with another guy at a car rental company, and it's like I hadn't even worked the first week yet. But I called him up and said, "Hey, you think you can Western Union me some money?" He's like, yeah, okay, I'll give you an advance on your first paycheck. So he's going to send me. But back then, like Western Union was 3 days to Puerto Vallarta, And so I'm down there. I'm stone cold sober, wandering the streets of Puerto Vallarta, And I think for the first time in my life, I realized that not everybody was living the way I was living. I sobered up for a minute, and it's like I had this horrible experience, waking up on the beach and all that. And I began to look around at a spring break in Puerto Vallarta, and I saw people that were living very different. They seemed to be happy. They weren't necessarily drinking. They weren't falling down drunk. They weren't doing any of the stuff that I thought was important in life. They had a completely different plan in life. I thought, well, that's it. I just need to quit drinking. If I quit drinking, I'll be okay. So anyway, money finally came in, got back to Seattle. And by the time I got back to Seattle, I had a bunch of stuff waiting in the mail for me. I had gotten a near DUI right before I left. And I was out with my girlfriend. We were drinking all day. And I was doing like 80 miles an hour down Pacific Highway for no reason at all. Not like I was in a hurry to get anywhere, but just driving recklessly. But the Des Moines police saw me. They came chasing after me. I tried to outrun them. They got me cornered by, 3 cops got me blocked in. And, when I stepped out of the vehicle, I fell face first in the middle of the street. And they had me handcuffed in the back of the car. And then there was a shooting down the street, and they said, we got to let you go. So they wrote me up for reckless driving and suspicion of drunkenness, and just told my drunken girlfriend to drive me home. And so I had that there. And then when I was driving my dad's beer truck right before it all went broke, it's like I was in an accident. It wasn't my fault, but somebody had hit me. But then they wanted to know why this, 19-year-old kid was driving a beer truck, because that's not legal to do, apparently, And then I had some other things. But so they said, we really need to see you at the court. So I showed up at the court, and I had this horrible experience in Mexico. And my high resolve, I'm going to quit drinking, never to do it again. I went in there and I told the judge, I said, I've seen the light. I quit drinking. You're right. I had some problems, but they were all alcohol related. It's like, I'm never going to drink again. And, you'll never see any more from me. I'm good now. And she goes, well, I hope you're right, but I'd like to get some proof of that. So why don't you get an evaluation? So they sent me to an evaluation. I didn't like the first one. I went through, I was going to lie to them, of course, I thought I'm going to minimize everything. I'm thinking, well, what would a normal drinker say? So I'm like cutting everything down to almost nothing. I never touch drugs. I'm only drink occasionally, and, all that kind of stuff. And he got down to the last question. He goes, well, how much do you drink now? I said, nothing. He said, okay. And you see, marked significant problem, immediate impatient, all that stuff. Wait a minute. It's like, he said, well, normal drinkers never need to quit drinking, It's like, I'm pretty sure you're lying to me, And it's like the fact that you really need to quit drinking shows you have a problem. It's like, oh, great, thanks. So, and when I went back to, at the time, if I had just started this new job, I didn't want to go to inpatient. So I convinced my dad, or I talked to my dad. He'd just gotten out of his 5th DUI, bought his way out of it. And I said, hey, how do you do this, And so he told me to go get another evaluation. But I found another place to go. And they said, well, we'll minimize it and let you in. So I started doing this 18-month-long outpatient program. And, there was some good information there. I really liked what they were offering me. At the same time, I thought, this is an opportunity to get my life together. I barely got through high school. I never had any high goals, but I thought, it's like, I'm going to, get back in school. I'm going to get a college education, so I'm going to work my way into the U. And so I started at the junior college. And at the same time, this military, I was in the Army Reserves at the time, and I hadn't shown up for a few months, and drinking kept getting in the way. They didn't mind if I showed up drunk. They just didn't like it when I didn't show up at all, but I went back to them and I said, hey, it's like, I'd really like to show you that I've changed, turned over a new leaf, and I'm a changed man here. And they said, well, we'll give you an opportunity. We're not going to let you touch aircraft anymore, but if you want to go in the infantry, you can do that. And I'm like, okay, and then I was working 2 jobs. I got back in the military, and I'm going to this treatment program, 18 months long. It was like everything's going great. It's like I piled up some money. In the 18 months, I went from E1. It's the lowest military grade possible. I made it like 3 times. I went from E1 to E5, which is unheard of. It just doesn't happen, But I was honor grad. Everything I touched looked beautiful. In school, I'm at the junior college in Des Moines, and 3.96 grade point average. Like, I'm the top of my class. Like everything was just great. On the inside, I'm not great. I kept, people kept saying, man, look how good you're doing. Look how great this is. And, I'm coming apart at the seams because I really thought that being sober would cure alcoholism. It stops drunkenness, but it doesn't do anything for alcoholism. And so after 18 months, my girlfriend was rather sick of my behavior. I was just angry. It's like I took it out on her every day. I never physically abused her, but just mentally and verbally, I just treated her like crap. It's like, I was just, kind of like Tim said, I was just an angry person. It's like, there was just no relief for what I was feeling. I was just restless, irritable, and discontent. And no matter what I was achieving, it wasn't enough. And And so I decided to try that desperate experiment of the first drink. I went over to 13 coins at the airport and pulled out my American Express Gold card because I was going to show them I was somebody now. And I had a nice meal, and I thought I want to have a coffee and one amaretto. I had a glass of amaretto with my after dinner, and a nice dessert drink, and that worked so well. I decided to go back 2 nights later and have two. And you guys know the story. I was drunk every day for the next couple of months. And every day I'd wake up and I'd say, I swear to God, I'm not going to drink today. I can't do this. And, every day I'd find myself drunk. And, sometimes I would think I'm changing my mind. Other times I'd completely forget that strange mental blank spot they talk about in the book, where it's like, I would be drinking the first one. Oh, wait, I wasn't drinking today. What am I doing again? And it was just that terrible cycle. And I began to get really scared because before I had some measure of control, before I could, sometimes put it down, I could get through a military school or get some project done or whatever. This one, it's like there was nothing I could do. It was coming and I had no control over it. And it was really scaring me. So, I was in the midst of that and still swearing every day I'm not going to drink. And I had missed like the last week or two of school. There was one class, I can't remember what class it was. I had a writing assignment that never got turned in. And I was trying to salvage the grade because I was working on my transfer to the U. I just had those couple more credits to get into the U. And so I went back to the instructor and lied to him about how my grandma died and I had to leave town immediately, and the usual stuff, and he believed me. Why wouldn't he? I was the top of the class right up until the time I took a drink, I wasn't the worst student, so he thought I was telling the truth. And so, okay, if you get the paper in, this was like even after the Christmas break, it's like, if you get that paper in, I'll go ahead and I'll salvage your grade. And so okay, so I'm sitting at home, it's January 11th, 1987. And I got my little IBM Selectric typewriter in front of me, and I'm trying to type, and my hands are shaking so bad that I can't type this paper. I got the rough draft scribbled out in my hand, but it's like, I can't stop shaking. And so I get this genius idea. It's like, I'm going to run over to Azteca with a $5 bill in my ID. Because that'll be just enough for one drink. That'll take care of the shakes, and then I'll be able to finish this paper and salvage this grade. And so I got over to Azteca, and I'm standing on the steps, and I knew I was BSing myself. I knew that if I walked in and had that one drink, that this terrible cycle would start all over again. I wouldn't stop at one. I'd find somebody in there to buy me the next one, or I'd run back and get more money, whatever it was. Like and that's why I'm arguing with myself. It's like back and forth. And I'm sitting there, and people are coming and going. They probably thought I was crazy. I must have looked like schizophrenic, talking to myself, or whatever it was. But in the midst of that, I heard a voice that said, "Why don't you go back to Alcoholics Anonymous?" And I had been to Alcoholics Anonymous before. It's like when I was going through that treatment, they required I go to so many meetings, get my slip signed and all that kind of stuff. And I thought, I did not want to go back to Alcoholics Anonymous, I had been there. It's like, you guys were talking about how many times you've been married and divorced and how many DUIs you'd had. And it's like, whatever it was, like, I just didn't think, I don't fit that block, It's like, and you guys were all old. You're like 40 and plus. I mean, I'm like 20 years old at the time, or 22, whatever it was, It's like there's no way I'm doing that. But, it's like this voice just shook me. I mean, it rattled me to the core. It's like, and because it wasn't something I was thinking I would want to do, I thought it must be from something bigger than me. I wasn't even sure I believed in God at that point, but so I ran back, and of course they had phone books back in those days, with little blue pages in the front, and Alcoholics Anonymous was in there. And I called Alcoholics Anonymous, and somebody answered, and they said, "Well, there's a meeting at the log cabin in Burien." So I ran in there, and by the time I got there, the meeting started at 7. I got there about 7:30. And I went in, and I'm sure they knew I was new, because I was the one shaking and crying the whole time. But I just sat there, and before, it's like those people talked. It was like Charlie Brown's teacher or whatever, like blah 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 blah. I didn't get it. I didn't understand it. It's like this time, it's like I heard every word they were saying. Every single person in that room was talking about what God had done for them and how it had changed their life. It's like it just killed me. It's like I don't know, it just completely gutted me. I just thought, I need to be here. I still wasn't so sure I liked your God stuff. I didn't like your 12 little steps or whatever, but, it's like, I knew you guys had something going on that I needed. So I started going every day. I, basically, lived there. In fact, sometimes I even slept on the couch in the meeting place between meetings, because I was afraid to be with myself outside of the hall, and I wasn't so sure about the sponsor thing, I'm not really good at asking for help, and I didn't want to have to depend upon anybody, but I did. I went to lots of meetings. I was there, sometimes 4 or 5 meetings a day, and I made it to my first year, and I got up to the podium, and I said whatever I said, and I thought, okay, now I should be good, and I still wasn't good. So in about 13 months, I bought a new car. I went and bought this new little Porsche, and I thought, no, that'll fix me, and I'm still not good, and so I found myself with this new car like 20 minutes after I bought it, doing 110 miles an hour down Ambon with a pistol in my lap, and I'm either going to pull the trigger or I'm going to hit something, but I can't live like this. And I hear it once again. I'm thinking sobriety is not drinking is the answer for alcoholism, which it obviously isn't. So I pulled in to the hall that day, and my sponsor, he was my sponsor for a while, and then he wasn't my sponsor when he went off to conquer the world, and now he's my sponsor again. But Daniel was there, and Daniel took one look at me and said, "Man, you're not okay." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay." And he says, "You think maybe you'd like to do what we're doing?" Because I thought going to meetings and wiping down the tables and pouring coffee and chairing and whatever I was doing was going to be. I was hoping I was getting it that way. I didn't really want to have to work the program. I didn't want to have to confess my sins. I don't want to make restitution. I don't want to do any of that stuff you guys are doing. And I'm not even so sure about the God thing. But and he's like, "Why don't you just do what we're doing?" And then I started arguing about whether or not I believe in God. And he says, "We don't really care what you believe." He says, "We only care what you're doing." He says, "Why don't you get on your knees and say a prayer?" And I'm like, "I don't want to pray. I prayed when I was a kid, and that didn't work, And he says, He said, "We don't care to get on your knees anyway." And so I got on my knees. I'm holding his hand right before the meeting starts, and I was terribly embarrassed. I remember being so embarrassed that somebody's going to see me praying with a guy on my knees. 10 minutes earlier, I'm ready to commit suicide. And now I'm more worried about what you're going to think of me. But yeah, I did it, and he immediately got me busy writing, and there was a lot of relief in the steps, and there was a lot of things I did, but I wasn't going all the way. To be honest with you, it's like I like that part in the big book where it says, that nobody's to be the arbiter of my sex conduct. I was pretty much a virgin when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I found I had some new powers, and so AA in the 80s, there was a lot of that going on. It's like, it was basically a dating scene, and I didn't really want to give that up. And so, I went in half measures, and I stayed sober, and I, hung out, and I did what you guys were doing for the most part. But there was a couple of amends I wasn't going to make. One was my stepdad, who had badly abused me, my little brother, my mom, and and then there was some sexual stuff I didn't want to look at, the way I treated women. And then I found myself at 5 years of sobriety. I had 2 gals pregnant, and that was one of those kind of Jesus moments where like, now what do I do? And I wasn't really looking to pay child support for 2 of them, so that maybe I should marry one, And of course, I'm unsponsored at this time. If I had a sponsor, I might have been smart enough to, get some advice. But instead I thought, I'm just going to marry the fun one, That lasted for about 6 months before the crazy one accused me of molesting my stepdaughter, and everything just went crazy. It blew up. And once again, it's like, I'm sober. I haven't drank for 5 years. I was kind of sober, I guess, but I'm at work, and I'm thinking, I don't want to go through this. She's filing for divorce and making accusations, and I thought, okay, God, if you're real, I really need to know it now. And so I sat down with a pistol in my lap at work, and I work up on Pacific Highway, and the traffic's going constantly, and the planes are flying in and out, and when I said that, it's like the whole world just stopped. It was probably only 10 seconds, but it seemed like an hour. It's like there was no sound, the clock didn't tick, nothing happened. And I just got this sense that it's going to be okay, which was amazing, I had never felt that kind of peace before. It's like, okay, maybe there is a God. So I put the pistol up and, put that thing away. It's like, okay, and then I got this sense like, you just need to do what you need to do. So I spent the next, about 18 months or so fighting for custody of my kids. I finally got custody of the kids. All the accusations were proved false, and everything went by the wayside. And thank you, God. It's like I went back to make amends to that stepfather, that I was sure he was 95% at fault, and maybe I had a little piece, But it didn't matter. Whatever piece I had, I was going to make that right. And I went and faced the people I'd been stealing from, even in sobriety. There were times when I was, hard up for money, and even sobriety, where I was pinching money from the till at work and doing things that I'm not proud of, But so I got a lot more honest, and I met this beautiful lady at the back here, and we got married, and I had kids, she had kids. We put them all together. It's like the Brady Bunch, and we wanted our kids to have a sense of higher power. So we, got involved in the church. I was going to just try and drop them off, but they said, no, we don't work that way. It's like, we'd like you to, help out a little bit. And, being AA, the hand of, responsibility, I need to be there. So I, next thing I know, it's like she's the church secretary and I'm running the youth group, and, we just had a great life, and then I don't know, I probably had 10, 12 years sobriety or something. And, I wandered in to pass it on one day, and I'd been there a few times, they didn't allow children. So when we had little kids, I wasn't there much, but went in there for a noon meeting, and I really felt uncomfortable. I was I had some AA friends. I was still believed in all the AA principles. I was trying to live an honest life. I was doing a lot of stuff, but I wasn't really sponsoring anybody. I had a couple sponsees, but they were the ones that just we talk once a month or go out to lunch occasionally. But I wasn't working with any new guys, and it's like I wasn't really connected to Alcoholics Anonymous. I had no service position there or anything else, and I remember walking in there thinking, this is really uncomfortable. It's like there's something wrong here. It's like there's nothing wrong on the outside. Something's wrong on the inside again. And this was much more subtle than before. This wasn't that restless and irritable stuff, but this was like, I just need to do more than what I'm doing. And so I kept going back to meetings. And then, this guy came in. His name was John. And John just relapsed. He comes in, he says, man, it's like, I just had a bad relapse. Like, I just woke up in this place I didn't want to be in. My wife's mad at me and things are not good. It's like, I really need a sponsor. And I'm there on my lunch break at noon. And I'm looking around waiting for somebody else in the room to raise their hand, go get John. And nobody's getting John. Nobody says a damn thing. I think, well, somebody will get him, And so I come back about a week later, and John comes back in and says, I relapsed again. I got some legal trouble now. My wife kicked me out. It's like, I can't see my kids. And it's like, I need a sponsor really bad. And he's just begging, the whole room. It's like, somebody needs to help me with this. And I'm like, I got to go. I got to be back in an hour. It's like, and so I walk right past John again. And then about 2 weeks later, his wife walks in and says, yeah, John overdosed and John's not coming back. And that's the thing that kind of got me. I thought, I have been so selfish because Alcoholics Anonymous has given me an amazing life, and I wasn't giving anything back. And I hate crying. Jeez, I feel like it's a baby. But anyway, I thought, God, what do I know about sponsorship? I've had some good sponsors, I have some not so good sponsors, but I don't really work well with people. It's like, I'd be a really shitty sponsor, And then somewhere in the back of my mind, I thought, well, a shitty sponsor would be better than no sponsor at all, probably, And so I'm going to give this a shot, maybe, So I just started, like, anytime somebody needed help, I just said, okay, I'll be happy to help you. And next thing I know, I got like 5 guys that run through the steps, and we were doing group step studies, and it's like putting 220 right at my butt. It's like, it just lit me up. It's like, I didn't know what I was missing until I did it. I mean, kind of like Alcoholics Anonymous. I was not smart enough to ever choose this lifestyle or to walk in here. It's like, I had to be forced in by the courts. It's a shame they don't force us in here anymore. And it's the same with sponsorship. I thought it was optional. The 12 by 12 gives us that out. It says that not everybody, needs to be a sponsor or a speaker. Some of us set up the coffee and shares and things. And I thought, well, good. I'll just pour a little coffee. I'll do a little stuff here and there, but I'm not going to be a sponsor. That's for those people like extra credit, or whatever, But there's nothing better in my life than to work with new guys. And I got a handful of them I'm working with now. And as like Tim said, I missed his date. And then part of that, I got like 6 guys I'm working with, and 3 of them are brand new. I got like 3 fifth steps scheduled this next week, which is like completely awesome. It's like, but how much more time do I have? I have 2 minutes and 46 seconds. Gee, that's not so bad, huh? But anyway, I guess what I want to tell you, the last thing, that stepfather that I swore, that I would never make amends to, that I hated. I used to just fantasize about how I would club him to death. My mom passed away 4 years ago. And when she died, he floundered for a bit. She'd taken care of him for 46 years. And, she's a good candidate for Al-Anon. She never actually made it there, but she should have. She loves alcoholics, But anyway, she took care of him for most of her life. And then when she died of cancer, he floundered. He went from one of his family members to another. And every place he went, they couldn't take him for more than a week or 2 and kicked him out. And then he went and got married to some gal over in Idaho. He moved in with her, and that went well for a month or 2. And then they split up. And then he moved back over there and tried it again. And so this last couple of years, it's just been horrible for him. And I mean, he's basically homeless, And so I said, hey, we have a place. We have another house. Why don't you go over there and stay? So he moved in. About a year ago now, or 9 months ago, or something, whatever it is. But, this guy that I absolutely hated, he calls me every day. I mean, every day to tell me he loves me, tells me all the things he's doing around the house. I don't know what God's done. It's like aliens have come and taken him and replaced him with somebody else, But I really know what happened. It's like, I went and made amends to a person that I was never going to make amends to. And we actually have a great relationship today. It's like he called me the other day and says, oh man, there's some pygmy rabbits in the backyard. He was so excited, And then he calls me the next day and he tells me about the golden eagles that are flying over the house. And then 2 days ago, he calls me and he says, it's like, I got to tell you this. It's like, I went out to turn the irrigation on, and it's like the whole ground just exploded with all this movement. And so there's 1,000 baby quails, And he said, it was just so cool. They're all around my feet and everything. And I feel like I'm getting a call from Saint, what's the saint? St. Francis, the patron saint of animals, I mean, it's like, yeah, it's amazing. But yeah, and that's just one of the many benefits of this program. I couldn't imagine a better way of life, and most of my sobriety, I've been trying to apply things on the outside to fix the inside. And my new favorite verse is from the 12 by 12, the end of the 12th step, where it says, "True ambition is not what we thought it was. True ambition is the deep desire to live usefully and walk humbly under the grace of God." Thank you.